the tape, you can pull the tape because we now got video.
Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in here as we watch the House at ease. The Senate is also at ease. There is some off-camera action happening right now with the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. As if you recall, there are two bills, Senate Bill 1210 and House Bill 472. Senate Bill 1210 has a little more code, references to code in it, and that passed the Senate earlier and is making its way over into the House. It should be heard in the House State Affairs Committee before it hits the floor on the House. House Bill 472, which is the other version with a little less code referenced, passed the House earlier today, and it looks like it may not get a hearing on the Senate side. So there might be a little bit of wheeling and dealing going on here as they try to figure out which bill to get through. One of the things they can do on the House side would be to amend the bill so that it looks exactly like the House side. If they do that, however, they still have to send it back to the Senate for it to get a vote. So they want, I guess there might be a play here to see whether or not the Senate would vote for that version of the bill, even though the previous bill, 1210, is a little confusing, I know, but the previous bill, 1210, did pass with a bunch of votes to spare, but even still, you're taking that risk that if you change their Senate bill and send it back to them to make it look like the House bill that is being stopped in the Senate currently, that it may not get a hearing and or it may not get to the floor. So we're kind of like in a standstill now. It looks like the easiest way for us to get this Idaho Medical Freedom Act 2.0 over the finish line is to simply pass Senate Bill 1210, accept it as is. My assessment on it is that it's still a great bill, even if it does reference a couple of extra lines of code. It's not expressly written in the bill. But that being said, if it does pass, there's nothing that says you can't come back next year and modify what you didn't like about it. But as a whole, it's not the most perfect bill, but it is definitely something that we would love to see get forward, and it addresses the governor's veto, reason for the veto. So that being said, folks, that's where we're at right now. We'll continue to monitor the House. If the committee, the Senate State Affairs Committee, goes into session, if that hearing starts, we'll hopefully be able to switch over to that if they air it, and stream there. In the corner of your screen there, you see Representative David Levitt talking with Representative Faye Thompson, and with them earlier was Representative Clint Hostetler, who is on the House State Affairs Committee, and he was there, and then he abruptly left, which means perhaps he might be headed downstairs to the State Affairs Committee, which means we hopefully will get a hearing soon. But that's pure speculation. We'll keep tabs. We need to dip in and help sort it out. We can. But for those who are joining us now or a little later, I'll leave it up to you folks to hash it out in the comments and keep everybody up to speed as to what's going on. And that's our take from here. So we'll continue to leave this on as we go through the night as they try to get this crucial piece of legislation across the finish line. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll check in back a little bit. All right, just seeing the comment that the music was a little loud. We're piping in the music live from the feed from public television, so I don't have total control over that, but hopefully this is a little bit better. Just want to get you up to speed here. The House State Affairs Committee did issue an agenda saying that they would convene at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. It is now 6:30 p.m. They haven't convened yet, but the House is at ease. And it is somewhat expected what is expected to happen next here is that the House State Affairs Committee will take up Senate Bill 1210, which is the Senate's version of the Idaho Medical Freedom Act 2.0 that addresses the governor's concerns that he laid out in his veto letter. It addresses there was a couple of fixes to that bill that addressed some more code, and the House version addresses less code. It just simply references the governor's concern, and so some of the back and forth here is is Senate Bill 1210 as fully freeing as House Bill 472. There is some debate on that. But both bills have passed their respective chambers. So the House Bill 472 passed the House, and right now it's not going to be getting a hearing in the Senate. Senate Bill 1210 passed the Senate, and it is expected to get a hearing in the House committee. The one scenario that could happen is that the House committee could amend this bill or recommend that it get amended by the House, in which case they could make the Senate bill look just like the House bill. But the risk, of course, is that when they do that, and if they pass it and send it back to the Senate, that the Senate won't like that happened, and then the bill dies, and then we have nothing. So as it stands right now, it's probably the best avenue, in my estimation, to just simply pass Senate Bill 1210, and then you'll send it right to the governor's desk if it gets out of the committee, and then heads out here to the House floor, and then the House floor sends it to the governor, and it addresses the governor's concerns, in which case we sign it, the Medical Freedom Act becomes law, and if there's anything that anybody has any issues with it, we come back next session and fix it, but the bulk of it will be law. We see Representative Clint Hostetler walking around the floor there. He is on the House State Affairs Committee, so they aren't, doesn't look like they're anywhere close to getting together. So there must be a lot of discussions happening back and forth between the Senate and the House as they try to finish this bill. The other thing is that they did pass the final maintenance bill, which means that technically they could just go home at any moment without addressing anything. So, but I think there's a lot of attention on this. It's made national news. You've had the AG weigh in on it. You've had national figures like Ryan Cole and I think even comedian Rob Schneider and many others across the country who've seen what's been going on here. Governor DeSantis from Florida was in town a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, that's a great bill. I'd love to see it get passed out here too." So, a lot of attention on this. And so I'm pretty sure they're going to try and get this through. So we'll keep an eye on it. This is the House you're watching. The Senate is also at ease, and no activity yet in the House State Affairs Committee. But stick with us. Stick with the program. We'll keep it on for you, folks. We'll keep it on. And hopefully we'll catch it. We'll check back in a little bit.
Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
The request, is there an objection? Hearing none, Senate Bill 1142 as amended in the House will be referred to the 10th order of business for possible concurrence in the House amendments.
Mr. President.
Senator Taves.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 1198 as A2 as amended in the House be referred to the 10th order of business for possible concurrence in the House amendments.
Heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, Senate Bill 1198 as amended in the House will be referred to the 10th order of business for possible concurrence in the House amendments.
April 3rd, 2025. Mr. President, I return herewith Senate Bills 1180, 1181, 1213, 1214, 1215, and Senate Joint Memorial 105, which have passed the House. McGinnis, Chief Clerk.
Senate Bills 1180, 1181, 1213, 1214, 1215, and Senate Joint Memorial 105, having been received from the House passed, will be referred to the Judiciary and Rules Committee for enrolling.
April 3rd, 2025. Mr. President, I transmit herewith enrolled House Bill 180 as amended in the Senate, 253 as amended in the Senate, 130 as amended in the Senate, as amended in the Senate, House Bill 355 as amended in the Senate, House Bill 248, House Joint Memorial 8, House Bill 436, 476, 477, 480, 481, and House Bill 479 for the signature of the President. McGinnis, Chief Clerk.
House Bills 180 as amended in the Senate, House Bill 253 as amended in the Senate, House Bill 130 as amended in the Senate, as amended in the Senate, House Bill 355 as amended in the Senate, House Bill 248, House Joint Memorial 8, House Bill 436, House Bill 476, 477, 480, 481, and 479, having been enrolled and signed by the Speaker, will be signed and returned to the House of Representatives. Senator Robbie, you'll be recognized as being present at this order of business. It's nice to see you.
April 3rd, 2025. Mr. President, I return here with Senate Bills 1194, 1117, 1157, 1171 as amended, 1201, 1203, 1204, 1206, 1207, 1208, 1209, and Senate Bill 1187, which have been signed by the Speaker. McGinnis, Chief Clerk.
Senate Bills 1194, 1117, 1157, 1171 is amended, 1201, 1203, 1204, 1206, 1207, 1208, 1209, and 1187 have been signed by the Speaker, will be referred to the Judiciary and Rules Committee for transmittal to the gentleman on the second floor.
There is no further business in the ninth order, Mr. President.
There being no further business in the ninth order, the Senate will now proceed to the 10th order of business, motions and resolutions. The Senate is now in the 10th order of business. And has for consideration Senate Bill number 1142 as amended in the House.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 1142A2 as amended in the House.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered, and the Senate will have been deemed as concurring in the House amendments to 1142 as amended in the House. The bill will be referred to the Judiciary and Rule Committee for engrossing. The Senate now has before it for consideration Senate Bill 1198 as amended in the House.
Mr. President.
Senator Taves.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 1198A2 as amended in the House.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate concur in the amendments from the House to Senate Bill 1198 as amended in the House. Senator Taves, you're recognized to open debate on that motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, the sponsor on the other side of the rotunda was also the co-chair of the DEI work group. And as the House sponsor and having been very involved in the process of developing the original recommendation from the work group, it made sense that she would have some opinions about the ultimate legislation that would come out of this body. She came up with the amendments, and what I found was that all of the amendments moved the legislation back towards the recommendation of the work group and towards the previous draft that 20 of you had co-sponsored. So I, as the sponsor, consider all of these amendments friendly amendments. So I'd encourage your aye vote. Debate is open, and Mr. President, I request a roll call vote.
Roll call has been requested, and 2 senators have supported already, so there will be a roll call vote. Debate is open on the motion. Is there further debate?
Yes.
Senator Guthrie, you're recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, just real briefly, this is an issue that has been around for a while, obviously. We kind of deal with it every year. We even go as far as to make it financially punitive to our institutions of higher learning, and this is another iteration of moving that issue in a further direction, and I see the amendments as in recognition of what the sponsor said, moving them back to a more aggressive posture. I think they are hostile amendments when you consider the negotiations that took place to get us to where 1198 was that passed on this floor. So I'm going to be voting to not concur.
Is there further debate on the motion? Senator Burns.
Mr. President, thank you. To debate.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I fully supported this bill when it left our body. I voted for it. I agree with the senator from 28 in that I believe it's too punitive, and it's not what we agreed to when the bill left. Unfortunately, I will be against this particular motion, but for the original bill that was passed originally in this body.
Mr. President?
Senator Cook, you're recognized to debate.
Thank you. Since this bill came across the floor, we as a body have voted on and passed a budget that penalized BSU and U of I each $2 million. And here we are again going to try and punish them if, as the sponsor had said before, if they've done anything wrong. But if I may just read in the Idaho Code, which I think I can do that without permission, I believe.
That is correct. You may read.
All right. So this is in, sorry, come on, move down. Title 33, Chapter 1, State Board of Education, Section 3. It says, in accordance with Section 6, Article 9 of the Constitution of the State of Idaho and Section 67-5909 Idaho Code. Subsection A, no public institution or higher education, school district, or public school, including a public charter school, shall direct or otherwise compel students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to any of the following tenets. 1, that any sex, race.
April 3rd, 2025. Mr. Speaker, we are Committee on Judiciary, Rules, and Administration report that we have engrossed House Bill 356 as amended in the Senate. SCOG, Chairman.
House Bill 356 as amended in the Senate will be filed for the first reading calendar engrossed. Without objection, the House now advanced to this 9th order of business, first reading of engrossed House bills.
April 3rd, 2025, House Bill 356 as amended in the Senate by State Affairs Committee regarding state assets.
House Bill 356 as amended in the Senate will be filed for the second reading calendar. Without objection, the House advanced the 15th order of business announcements. House 15th order of business, Joan 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for an announcement.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good ladies and gentlemen, just kind of want to give you a heads up on the road map here, what we're looking at. As you notice, the jacket changed again. I think the easiest way to say it is the Senate just ran out of gas. They're having problems with their staff being able to get further. They think that if they continue on, they're going to be here till 2 o'clock in the morning, and they won't have staff to do that. So their anticipation was they have one more committee they have to run. They'll do that in the morning. We have one ourselves as well, so we'll run that in the morning as well. Both state affairs, by the way, which is fine, and we'll come back here on the floor at 10, and hopefully that we'll be able to finish it all up tomorrow. I would still plan on going into the afternoon a little bit, because it does take time after those committees to still get everything up here, do a suspension calendar, all those things that we have to do. So that's the best roadmap I can give you right now, but please, as you know, it's always subject to change. We're doing the best we can to keep you informed on where we're going with that. If you have questions for me, feel free to hit me up afterwards, or any other member of leadership.
Further announcements. Clerk may read.
House State Affairs Committee will meet Friday, April 4th, 8 a.m., East Wing Room 40, Crane 13, Chairman.
The Speaker take personal privilege and ask all of you to thank Representative Tanner for dinner tonight. That was very kind of him. He's not here right now, but when you see him, thank him, because he paid for that all his own. Further announcements? Hearing none. Good gentleman, 27.
Is it possible to make a motion that tomorrow we can ignore our usual dress code and come comfortably?
No.
I need 50 to stand.
Motion's out of order. Shut the hell up and sit down. Further announcements. Good gentleman, 22. Sorry, I got to go to the 16th. House events within no other announcements. By the way, before we leave, there's the guy that bought you dinner. Tell him thanks. In fact, the gentleman from 24 should be very grateful, because his turn's tomorrow. Gentleman, hold on. The House will be back in order. Gentleman, 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we're there, but State Affairs will meet at 9 a.m., our usual time tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.
Okay. Good gentleman from 13, will you answer a question? Does that will you be more than an hour if we go on the floor at 10?
No.
Okay.
I can tell you right now, the chairman's intent is to take that bill up, and we will take action by 9:45.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep.
Further announcements? Hearing none, the House now advanced to the 16th order of business. Adjournment. The House to the 16th order of business. Good gentleman, 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House do now adjourn until Friday, April 4th, 2025 at 10 a.m. 10 a.m.
Gentleman, 15.
Speaker, I second the motion.
Thank you, gentlemen. You heard the motion, non-debatable motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll House adjourn until the hour of 10 a.m. Friday, April 4th, 2025. We'll see you in the morning, everybody.
You're watching the Idaho
and practices. You can go Google that. There's actually 45 universities being investigated by the by that office for pushing DEI, which, as many of us know, was President Trump, I believe, signed an executive order against that. Was one of the first things he did. And I think a hostile amendment is an amendment that the bill sponsor does not want or like or accept. And here we have the bill sponsor from District 4 saying he's okay with these amendments. Seems pretty non-hostile to me. The senator from District 32 read from Idaho Code about all the things that our colleges shall not do. They should not teach this and that and this and that. Yet they do, and they are. They're doing it right now. You know, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's rooted in Marxism. This is America. How long do we keep punishing people? For as long as they keep doing it. So I'm fine with these amendments. The bill sponsor is okay with these amendments. They're not hostile, and I believe this is the correct course to keep going, and we'll keep pushing if they keep doing it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate on the motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to ask a senator from District 13 for a question.
Senator 13, would you yield to a question from Senator 32?
No.
Senator fails to yield.
Could I debate a second time?
Senator Cook wishes to debate for the second time on the motion. Is there a senator who wishes to debate for the first time on the motion with regard to concurrence? Hearing none, Senator, you may debate for the second time.
Thank you. Senators, I believe that Boise State is under investigation for stuff they've done in the past. They have corrected their stuff. They've admitted what they've done was wrong. They have corrected that, and yet we still to kick them down. My question would have been, where is the proof? What class? What class are they teaching right now that is against the law? Because the law states they can't teach that, and if they're against the law, then we need to run down to the AG's office and prosecute them. Thank you.
Is there further debate on the motion with regard to concurrence?
Mr. President.
Senator Cole.
To debate the motion.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. It should be noted these universities are funded by the state and therefore regulated by the state. It is our responsibility to ensure that these institutions are not supporting or teaching an ideology that has its roots based in communism. I think that's fair to say. Governments should be regulated. This is where regulation should come into play. We should make sure that government-run institutions are not teaching communist ideologies, and we can do that by providing these additional regulations that this bill gets us there. Citizens of Idaho are overwhelmingly against DEI, and I believe this bill and the amendments to this bill, they get us down that path. So I will be in support of this.
Is there further debate on the motion?
Mr. President, debate a second time.
Is there any senator who wishes to debate for the first time on the motion with regard to concurrence? Senator Lakey, you are recognized first.
What the heck? Senators, this isn't about punishing now. This is about saying what the punishment is if they violate it. It's not about taking money away like we've done in the past. It's about here's what the consequences are if you engage in what's prohibited under the statute. It's also not about requiring them to sign a statement or adhere to a concept or believe in something. It's simply about not requiring them to take a class as part of their required curriculum. You can still have an elective that somebody chooses, but you're not requiring them to do it. You're also not using DEI in hiring and admissions to programs. So I think it's a little bit different than what we've done in the past. But again, it's not about punishing now. It's about being clear on what the consequences are for violating this. So encourage your I vote.
Is there further debate? Seeing none, Senator Taves, you're recognized to close debate on the motion as to whether or not the Senate shall concur with the House amendments on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, as I already stated, a lot of work went into this legislation. It started really back in, I think it was November, October, that we started meeting. We formulated legislation, a draft. We recommended that. This amendment moves us back to the recommendation of the interim work group. I also want to point out that there was debate that said that these concepts weren't in our institutions anymore, but previously I've presented to some members of this group over 100 pages of examples from the last year. If there isn't a problem, the penalties that are of concern to some of the senators won't be any problem at all. If there's no DEI, there won't be fines. So I'd say, what is the concern? So why are we doing this? Because we want to make sure that if it's gone to the degree it's gone away, it doesn't come back. And that's what's healthy for our institutions of higher education. We want to make sure that our students aren't required or otherwise compelled to take trainings, to take classes. And then I'm going to point out once again we're talking about the amendments, what the penalties would never apply to. That's the academic freedom of instructors, the free speech of students, as long as it's protected by state and federal law. So we're not taking away speech, we're not taking away academic freedom, we're simply saying stop forcing these ideologies on our students. Thank you. Debate is closed.
Debate is closed. It has been moved and seconded that the Senate concur in the House amendments. So the question before the Senate is, shall the Senate concur with the House amendments to Senate Bill 1198 as amended in the House? With a roll call vote requested, the Senate Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthon.
Aye.
Berndt. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Groh. Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Lakey. Lenny. Lent. Nichols. Okonowitz. Robbie. Ricks. Ruckty. Semmelroth. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Ward Engelking. Wintrow. Woodward. Cito. Seiderveld. Ricks. Wintrow.
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
60 seconds allowed on a motion. Because it's debatable, 60 seconds is allowed on a motion. So, Senator, you do have 60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senators. I think the real dangerous part here is not what we hear just on the surface as far as, oh, it's not required or this isn't required or that's elective, is because we will see people go in and try to mousetrap folks, whether it's training or a class, and now they have a straight arrow right to the AG's office. And the same people that get a sexual harassment complaint don't get to go to the AG, they get to go to somewhere else, and that's not fair. And I think that is exactly what is going to happen here, and I think it's a shameful act to do this.
Senator Wintrow votes nay. And senators will remind the body to keep your judgments professional. Roll call shows 20 aye, 15 nay, 0 absent or excused. A majority voting in the affirmative, the motion passes. The concurrence are accepted by the Senate. The concurrences will be referred to the Judiciary and Rules Committee for engrossing. Senator Den Hartog. Don't know if your microphone's working. There you go.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate advance to the 11th order of business.
Hearing no objection, the Senate will now advance to the 11th order of business. First reading of bills. The Senate is in the 11th order of business.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be read by number, author, and title only, and the journal show they've been read at length.
Hearing no objection, it is so ordered.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 455 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to the appropriation to the Department of Environmental Quality, appropriating additional monies to the Department of Environmental Quality for fiscal year 2026. In the House of Representatives, House Bill 482 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to appropriations, appropriating additional monies to the Military Division for fiscal year 2025, limiting cash transfers from the Budget Stabilization Fund for fiscal years 2025 and 2026. In the House of Representatives, House Bill 483 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to the appropriation and funding for the State Liquor Division, appropriating additional monies to the State Liquor Division for fiscal year 2026. In the House of Representatives, House Bill 484 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to funding for the Office of Information Technology Services, appropriating additional monies to the Office of Information Technology Services for fiscal year 2026.
Senate Bill 455, 482, 483, and 444 will be referred to the Finance Committee.
Mr. President, I ask the Senate go at ease.
Senate will be at ease.
You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
Industries. Look at the tech sector. Okay, we just talked about Apple at the beginning of this, and how Apple hasn't had an actual innovation in 20x years.
Apple makes a
had an actual innovation in 20
provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
Senators, we're going to be at ease for a bit. We have some paperwork to move around, and the Secretary has some work to do, but there are 4 appropriations bills that we just read in, 455, 482, 483, 484. Take a look at those.
You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in session is provided by the
Idaho is the dirt under your fingernails after an honest day's work. Idaho is the hug around your neck when your daughter spells her first word. Idaho is the written word of the law, steadfast and impartial, guarding liberty for all. Idaho is the family rifle passed down, a legacy of protection and the right to stand firm. Idaho is the echo of your own voice, unshaken and free, standing tall among the world's silenced. Idaho is the home that's built to weather storms, not empty wallets. Idaho is the quiet trust between a patient and healer, unbroken and sacred. Idaho is the hymn carried by the Spirit, gathering neighbors together in faith and purpose. Idaho is the laughter around a campfire, a family's bond growing stronger with every word. Idaho is the pioneer's will, firm and clear. We govern ourselves, free and unbound. Idaho is what America was. Let's keep it that way. Ask your legislator to sign the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge to preserve our shared values. We ride together.
Funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho. You're watching the Idaho Senate. Hardware and closed captioning for Idaho in Session is provided by the Idaho Legislature and Idaho Legislative Services Office. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
Ready, Sawyer? Okay.
Senate will come to order. Prior to going at ease, the Senate was in the 11th order of business, the first reading of bills. The Senate is in the 11th order.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate return to the 6th order of business.
There being no objection, the Senate will return to the 6th order of business. Reports of standing committees. The Senate is in the 6th order of business.
April 3rd, 2025, the Finance Committee reports out House Bill 455, 482, 483, and House Bill 484 and recommend they do pass. Grow, Chairman.
House Bills 455, 482, 483, and 484 will be referred to the 12th order of business, the second reading calendar.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate advance to the 12th order of business.
There being no objection, the Senate will now advance to the 12th order of business, the second reading calendar. The Senate is now in the 12th order of business.
Mr. President, for a Senate privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, everyone should have a blue suspension calendar on your desk. That is the order in which we will be proceeding with the appropriations bills. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate take up the House appropriation bills in the order in which that they appear on the suspension calendar.
There being no objection, we will proceed with the calendar as presented.
Mr. President, I move that all rules of the Senate interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 455 be suspended.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that all rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill number 455 be suspended. The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthem.
Aye.
Berndt. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Kaiser, Cole, Lakey, Lenny, Lind, Nichols, Okonowitz, Robbie, Ricks, Ruchte, Samaroff, Shippey, Taylor, Taves, Van Orden, Ward Engelking, Wintrow, Woodward, Cito, Seiderveld, Adams, Robbie, Ruchte,
Roll call shows 33 ayes, 0 nay, 2 absent or excused. More than 2/3 having voted in the affirmative, all rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill number 455 have been suspended. The Senate now has before it for final consideration House Bill number 455. The Senate Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 455 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to the appropriation to the Department of Environmental Quality, appropriating additional monies to the Department of Environmental Quality.
Senator Woodward.
President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 455 be dispensed with, and the Journal showed has been read the third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
You heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, Senator Woodward, you're recognized to open debate on House Bill number 455.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, this looks like a great big request, but it's not that big of a request. A lot of this is just changing the timing on some of the money that's we've already committed to spending. I'll start on the statement of purpose with the fiscal note. That first line item, targeted pay to address turnover. I think that the write-up from the legislative budget book really explains that well. We are getting to a point where we are not issuing permits from the Department of Environmental Quality in a timely manner. So you ask, why aren't we? That's because we have too much staff turnover. So we're, on average right now, the staff are staying about, these younger, or the newer employees are staying about 2.8 years. They get enough experience, and then they're getting pulled off into private industry. And why, you ask? And the answer is money, because we're not keeping up. We're not in the market rates, which is, we have in policy in Idaho code that we're going to pay at market rates in some band around those market rates. We're not making it. And so we're losing those employees off to private firms. You've heard this story before, but this one really comes into play when for some of the larger investments that people make here in Idaho in starting new businesses, whether it's a body shop and you're trying to get a clean air permit, or you're working with a feeding operation, you need to get a clean water permit, any of those examples, we're holding up industry, and we want to get caught back up on that. So that is a $592,800 request for targeted pay for employees. That covers 240 employees in all 5 of the budgeted programs in the Department of Environmental Quality. Moving on to the next one, there's a $1,500,000 request there from dedicated funds. That's a cash transfer, moving from one fund to another, and this is in regards to the Superfund cleanup site in northern Idaho. So if you're familiar with the Silver Valley, there's a great big project there that's been going on for a long time that's referred to as the box, which is a 23 square mile area around the mines and smelters. And then the next stage of that Superfund cleanup is in the basin, so the river flowing out of that area and down toward Coeur d'Alene. So we've made a commitment to moving money into the fund so that in 2037 we're ready with a match, a 10% match for the federal Superfund dollars to come in, and then we'll get to work on that basin cleanup, and that's the next piece of it. The next line item you'll see there, the Triumph mine remediation. I think most of you have probably heard of this one before. You know, it's a mine that we are now responsible for the cleanup. There's an ongoing effort there, and so this is additional money to be able to continue to meet that obligation. The next line item is the biggest piece on there, and I want to try and make sure I explain this clearly, but this is money that we have already we had put into the base, and it was going out over a series of years with the intent that it would come back out of the base in 2028, I believe. And so we're finishing up some of these projects, and so instead of having this making all this money available year by year, this request brings all the money into this year and provides the authorization if the expenditure is there, so that we can pay for these projects and get them finished up. So we're not changing the amount of money, just the timing of the money, what's available for these clean water projects. There's another fund shift there, a little bit smaller amount compared to some of these others. And then you see that last, item number 6, the infrastructure grants, which is a $10 million proposal to continue with some of the work that has gone on around the state and we've seen great successes with. When we had some of this money available in prior years, we put that money out for small communities in their sewer and water systems to make upgrades to meet the requirements for drinking water and wastewater treatment is oftentimes very expensive and even prohibitively expensive for a small system. And so small operations across the state, whether districts or municipalities, have been able to apply for a grant through the Department of Environmental Quality. And what we've seen is that there is still a great amount of need to bringing these small systems into compliance or bringing them up to snuff for as far as just a system that is worn out and is going to go out of compliance. And so this $10 million request is a proposal to continue making an investment in these small systems around the state. So the total you see there is $75,436,300 enhancement, and of course that 44% doesn't mean a lot in this case because we're moving, just condensing the appropriation for multiple years into 1 year. So this is not an increase year to year like that, but it shows up as a great big number there because the number is bigger this year, even though the money's already been committed over the years. So, Mr. President, with that, debate is open.
Debate being open, is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Anthony.
To declare a 39H, I work for a municipality, and this has some components in there that does affect municipalities.
Your declaration will be noted in the Journal.
And also to debate the bill.
You have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. President, and I just wanted the opportunity to talk a little bit about this bill and this budget. Senators, years ago, I worked for the city of Minidoka. It's not just a county, it's a city. There's a city of Minidoka in the county of Minidoka. And the city of Minidoka is a tiny, tiny town. As a matter of fact, the last election they had before I had to resign there, I was the city attorney, I think, for 13 years. By the way, I got paid $50 a month. That's how much I earned as a city attorney there. The last election they had there, they had 14 voters. That's a tiny town. But they had a water system. So they delivered water to their residents. And so you can imagine that if you have a water system that you suddenly realize has a need for an upgrade, and let's imagine that upgrade's $1 million. It's devastating news because the only way you're going to fix it, and you've heard me say these kinds of things on the floor, is you're going to have to raise the rates, or you're going to have to try to get some grant money. You got to do something, but in order to keep the water of a quality such that you can continue to have a public water drinking system, you got to do something, or you got to turn the water off. The other day, their current city attorney called me, and he said to me, "How do you unincorporate a city?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we're having trouble out here, and I don't know if they can stay a city anymore. Because they keep running into these situations where the infrastructure just can't be afforded. And by the way, when you unincorporate a city, that falls back on the county. And so the county is saying, wait a second, you unincorporate, now we have to run the water system." So these are real problems in these small little towns. And what is contemplated in this budget when you talk about that $10 million going into this grant fund is that it's an expenditure for only small towns. Small towns can only qualify. And you have to have skin in the game. So this isn't just a handout. This is a fund where you have to come in and you have to say, we've got some money put together, or we've got permission to take on debt. And if you can demonstrate that, you can get some matching money to get the job done. Every city in my district, I'm just thinking this through, of any consequence, that doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean, has sewer problems, every single one of them. The city of Rupert, where I work, they're needing to pay about $44 million. So it's a town of 6,500. They need to pay $44 million. The city of Burley, the largest town in my district, who wouldn't qualify for this money, by the way, but I've got to tell you anyway, they're 13,000 people. They need to get together about $155 million to fix the sewer. The city of Paul, which is a pretty small town, they've put a moratorium on any residential growth of any consequence. Their sewer just cannot be fixed. They don't have the money. This particular fund that is in the budget a few years ago had placed in it by the legislature $300 million. And we told the state we told the cities in the state, anybody who is under, I believe, 7,500 in population can apply. So we had $300 million. We told the cities, if you're under 7,500, I believe, it could be 6,500, if you're a small enough city, you can apply for the money. You have to be ready. It's a short window of time. You have to have your act together. You have to have your engineering ready. Come and ask for some money, and you have to have skin in the game. You have to have some money rounded up or permission to take on debt. But come and ask for the money. And for that $300 million, there were requests of $1.4 billion. That is the need in Idaho in these small towns. And so guess what? That $300 million was gone in an instant. So the $10 million that's being placed in this bucket, it's a drop in the bucket. I mean, it almost makes me sick that this is all we can put in this bucket right now. And I will say to this body, we're going to have to do something. I don't know what we're going to do, but I can tell you right now, when you go to a place like the city of Minidoka, and you say to them, you know, you have $1 million problem. We only have $10 million in the whole state to help you. And you're going to have to raise your rates 3,000% or whatever. I hope you get a feel for the need that's out in the state. It's a real problem. But this is just a little start. And I hope that in the future, I can continue to persuade my friends here that there is a serious infrastructure need in the small places of Idaho. And I don't know exactly what the solution is, but it is real, and it is only going to get worse. And I just know this is just a start, and I hope that you can support this budget because it's not going to get better. And so thank you for letting me just take the time. I know it's late tonight, but just to give you a feel for what we need to do in some of these small towns in Idaho. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just briefly, Senators, I just wanted to speak to that targeted pay to address turnover, that line item. I know of many small businesses in my area whose building permits and endeavors that they've tried to do have been delayed because of the process at DEQ, and a lot of that is because of turnover. We don't have staff in the right positions, and it's not for any fault of the agency. It just is the current situation. I also know of several school construction projects that have been delayed because of this. So I think sometimes we think about the permits that go through DEQ just for some of our large businesses, our manufacturing entities, but I think this really impacts small businesses, and I've also seen it impact schools in different communities. So I encourage your support.
Is there further debate? Not seeing any. Senator Woodward, you recognize the closed debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did miss one detail that I want to share when we talked about that $73,813,000 where we're changing the timeline, and I kind of hit on it but didn't make it clear, but it converts the ongoing portion of the department's appropriation to one time, and so we're not, and that's why I made the comment about that 44%. We've made this by bringing those funds into 1 year so we can pay off these projects as they finish up. We're not adding more. In fact, we are pulling money out of the base. When we're taking it from an ongoing status to a one-time status, we're pulling money back out of that base, just like had been promised when we started bringing in all that ARPA money. I do want to share with you, instead of making photocopies for 35 times and pass them around here this evening, that I just want to share the entities out here that agree with some of these efforts. The Idaho Dairymen's Association has sent us a letter saying that they support this. Idaho Association of General Contractors is in support of these these letters come from, are in support of the targeted pay increases, and you can see the entities, the Potato Commission, the Sugar Beet Commission, all of these organizations that represent Idahoans who are out there trying to run a business, hire people, help and keep moving the Idaho economy moving along. We also have, for that $10 million proposal, a letter from the Idaho Rural Water Association in support of that. Mr. President, debate is closed.
Debate being closed, the question is, shall House Bill 455 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthon. Berndt. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Grow. Guthrie.
Aye.
Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Blakey. Lenny. Lind. Nichols. Okonowitz. Ricks. Ruchte. Semoroff. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Ward Ingleking. Wintrow. Woodward. Cito. Carlson. Shippey. There is also a paired vote. Senator Robbie votes aye. Senator Zeiderveld votes nay.
Roll call shows 25 ayes, 10 nays, 0 absent excused. More than a majority having voted in the affirmative, House Bill 455 has passed the Senate. Is there a correction to title? Hearing none, the title is approved, and House Bill 455 will be returned to the House. Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, while you're still up there, Mr. President, I move that all rules of the Senate interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 482 be suspended.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
The motion is that all rules be suspended to entertain 482. The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthon.
Aye.
Berndt. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw.
Aye.
Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Grow.
Aye.
Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Blakey. Lenny. Lind. Nichols. Okonowitz. Robbie. Ricks. Ruchte. Semoroff. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Ward Ingleking. Wintrow. Woodward. Cito. Zeiderveld. Robbie.
Roll call shows 34 ayes, 0 nay, 1 absent or excused, more than 2/3 having voted in the affirmative. All rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 482 have been suspended. The Senate will now have before it for final consideration House Bill number 482. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 482 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to appropriations, appropriating additional monies to the Military Division for fiscal year 2025, limiting cash transfers from the Budget Stabilization Fund for fiscal years 2025 and 2026.
Mr. President.
Senator Groh.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that we dispense with further reading of House Bill 482, and that the journal show that it's been, let me find it right here, the journal show that it's been read the third time at length and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Senator Groh, you're recognized to open debate on House Bill number 482.
Thank you, Mr. President. This should be your favorite budget bill of the entire session because this is the end of session budget bill. Now, the sequence has two other appropriation bills coming after this one, but this is one where we kind of tie up all of the loose ends for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026. So first, and our good senator from District 1 will want to speak to this as well. But it's a little piece of this entire bill. There are several pieces here. It's kind of a cleanup bill. This is the one that will appropriate $200,000 from the general fund to the Military Division to support the commissioning of the USS Idaho, a Virginia-class nuclear-powered fast attack submarine. That funding is a customary contribution of the naming state to promote, in this case, Idaho, and provide scholarships for crew members through the Dolphin Scholarship Foundation. The second piece, Budget Stabilization Fund. This is a fund where we have our rainy day, as it's often called, a reserve for challenges in case we have a recession, that kind of thing. We currently have $880 million sitting there through fiscal year 2026. And the legislature is directed to maintain that rainy day fund balance since it reached its statutory cap of 15% of the general fund revenue collections in fiscal 24. So we're just going to leave it there. We're not going to add to it or subtract from it. Third, but it takes an action of this group to make that decision. Third, we're going to talk about the bond levy equalization program. When we passed the House Bill 521 last year, that preempted the whole program. You remember that was up to $1 billion for school facilities. So the bond levy equalization fund was no longer needed, so funds that are left in there are being transferred into the general fund, and that's about $37 million. Section 4, we have what is called the Constitutional Defense Fund. And we're transferring the remaining balance in that fund. It hasn't been used a lot. There's $1.1 million, which will be sent to the Legal Defense Fund. What is that? For the legislature. That's what the Senate and the House have to defend ourselves on any lawsuits that come against us regarding any of our legislation that we have passed. The next item is the Governor's Emergency Fund. There's a small balance in there of $652,000, and so we're transferring that to the general fund. Section 6 has to do with the public schools support appropriation. You may remember, if you were around, that we had House Bill 1, where we appropriated $330 million ongoing for public schools, and that was being taken out of sales tax revenues. And so we've had a little bit of a challenge. We have what's called the Economic Outlook Committee. Each year we look at that and we try to project the revenues. And we look at the comparison with how the governor projects the revenues. And we've had this $330 million difference at times that we can't decide if that's in the total revenue or not. So from an accounting or bookkeeping standpoint, we're going to transfer that directly into the public schools income fund and bypassing the general fund appropriation for public schools. So that is a bookkeeping thing. And with that, I'll just give you the last item. It has to do with the military division. Remember we do the executive compensation every year for all of the different departments and agencies. And the military division is a little different, so it doesn't really fit. And so we have to have an agreement to implement CEC for the military division. Why is that? Because we have our own National Guard folks, they're Idaho employees, and we have federal counterparts that are working in the same place. And so we need to make sure that they're doing substantially the same work. We need to make sure that they get substantially the same pay. So that's kind of the close up for everything. We get that passed. That's those are the last transfers that we have to do this year for our budget. So with that, I encourage your support on this bill. Thank you. Debate is open.
Debate is open. Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Ward Engelking.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I told my chairman that I would probably support this, but I really want to talk about the $330 million that is, that's from House Bill 1 from the extraordinary session, and that money is to go to public education, public schools. And it currently is in the public school income fund, and then it's swept into the general fund, then put into the budgets. But my fear is that people will forget later on, when some of us aren't here, that remember House Bill 1 and what this money is supposed to be going to, that they will forget that it's guaranteed to go to public education, because we're now going to put it in the general fund. And this is supposedly the governor had put it into the public school income fund, a dedicated fund, so that it would always go to public education. A chairman, not the chairman that's sitting in this body, but a fellow co-chairperson, moved that money, didn't want it to look like public schools weren't getting a big enough raise that first year that we had this $330 million, so moved it into the general fund, which started this whole mess. And I know it's a accounting mess. It's very frustrating to me that we even got into this situation, but I'm hoping this body, all of you really young people, will remember that the $330 million is for public education, ongoing, not to be diverted. And so I'm trusting that's going to happen, and I wanted to say it on the record so that it's in the journal and people will know that that $330 million is dedicated for public schools. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, to debate the bill. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have a concern with Section 4 of the bill. It transfers the remaining $1.1 million that's in the Constitutional Defense Fund over to the Legal Defense Fund. We've talked about those two funds before. The Constitutional Defense Fund was set up a couple decades ago in the 90s when federal government wanted to send nuclear waste to Idaho, and we needed a fund to defend ourselves against federal government, and that's when we set that up. But it's morphed over time. It's expanded, as these things often do, but now we're going to move the balance of that fund out and into the Legislative Legal Defense Fund, a fund controlled by the House and the Senate, or by our leadership, and that is mainly used to pay attorney fees when we pass constitutionally questionable legislation that then gets into litigation. We usually know when we do it. It's no secret. We hear about it, whether it's the press or people coming in to testify in our committees that have expertise, or they contact us. So it's not like we trip into this stuff. We do it with at least some level of consciousness, and then we now have a fund that we can just pay attorney fees for the other side, for ourselves, and not a lot of sunshine on that fund, at least not the type of sunshine that goes into other appropriations that we make. So those are my concerns with the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Senator Woodward.
Mr. President, I won't bore you with a sea story. I'll ask for your support, though, in making that contribution to the USS Idaho's scholarship fund. I do think it's probably important to note that in these cash transfers, in the past, we have made some transfers and we're not doing it this year. So we made that policy choice and we stepped back from maxing out the Budget Stabilization Fund. We stepped back from the Public Education Stabilization Fund transfer. So we haven't done a few of those things that and if you remember when I talked about the Idaho Department of Land's budget, we paid part of the fire bill from last year out of the fund balance. So and I think everybody knows we made a choice to lower the income tax rate. That was part of that balancing the budget, and that was a policy choice. But we are deviating a little bit from some of the historical path or investments we've made in keeping up our funds, rainy day funds, topped off. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Groh, you're recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the comments from the senators from District 18, 29, and number 1. I knew our good commander from District 1 would want to talk about the submarine. I thought he'd give us a little more of the seafaring stories, but he didn't. Let me just comment on the $330 million again. That was a real struggle the last 2 years in the Economic Outlook Committee, which is the committee charged with trying to project what the revenues are going to be for the state of Idaho before we begin the legislative session each year. And we had this disconnect between how are we handling that 330? Does the governor have it, gentleman on the second floor, have it in his projections or not? And do we have it in or not? It's been very confusing. So it will assist us a great deal to make that transfer so that we're all on the same page when we're projecting the revenues. On the Constitutional Defense Fund, I appreciate that comment. The fund will still be in place. We will use this money currently into the Legislative Defense Fund. If we need money into that Constitutional Defense Fund, we can appropriate that next year when we come back for the legislative session. So with that, I would appreciate your support on these few items that are kind of collected together here so we can clean up and get out of here. Thank you.
Debate is closed. The question is, shall House Bill 482 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Aye. Anthem.
Aye.
Berndt. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Tin Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Groh. Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Blakey. Lenny. Lent. Nichols. Okonowitz. Robbie. Ricks. Ruckte. Samaroff. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Ward Engelking. Wintrow. Woodward. Cito. Seiderveld. Robbie.
Roll call shows 33 aye, 1 nay, 1 absent or excused. A majority having voted in the affirmative, House Bill number 482 has passed the Senate. Is there a correction to title? Hearing none, the title is approved, and House Bill number 482 will be returned to the House of Representatives.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I move that all rules of the Senate interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 483 be suspended.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that all rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill number 483 be suspended.
Mr. President.
Senator Harris.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. The roll call vote used to suspend the rules for the immediate consideration of House Bill 482 be now used to suspend the rules for the immediate consideration of House Bill 483.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, roll call shows 34 ayes, 0 nay, 1 absent or excused. More than 2/3 having voted in the affirmative, all rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill number 483 have been suspended. The Senate now has before it for final consideration House Bill number 483. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 483 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to the appropriation and funding for the State Liquor Division, appropriating additional monies to the State Liquor Division for fiscal year.
Mr. President.
Senator Carlson.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the further reading of House Bill 483 be dispensed with, and the journal show it has been read the third time at length, section by section, placed before the Senate for final consideration.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Senator Carlson, you're recognized to open debate on House Bill 483.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have seen this bill before. It was just a different number. The Liquor Division holds a statutory duty to provide control over the importation, distribution, sale, and consumption of distilled spirits. All liquor appropriations derive from the agency's own revenues. The division consistently maintains a 36 to 37% profit margin, with all profits distributed back to the state. In FY 2024, those total distributions reached $118.3 million, largely going to cities, counties, courts, and the general fund. This appropriation is for 2026 budget enhancements of $644,300. We have removed $77,000 from the last revision. It removed electronic document system, and it's a 2.1% increase. Remember that the Idaho State Liquor Division is funded through its own revenues. These appropriations do not provide additional cash to the agency. The appropriations are the only means by which the agency is authorized to spend a portion of its revenues and cover needed costs. There is no money coming from this budget is not funded by the general fund. They are funding themselves. With that, debate is open.
Debate is open. Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Carlson, you're recognized to close debate.
Thank you. Debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the House or the Senate is: shall House Bill number 483 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthon.
Aye.
Berndt. Bierke. Blaylock. Burtenshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Grow. Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Lakey. Lenny. Lind. Nichols. Okonowitz. Ricks. Ruckte. Samaroff. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. Ward Engelking. Wintrow. Woodward. Zito. Bierke. Den Hartog. Grow. Lenny. Lent. Ricks. Ruckte. Shippey. Ward Engelking.
60 seconds.
Senator Ward Engelking, you have 60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just so happy you're treating Senator from 7 better than I was treated. I'm happy maybe this bill's going to go away and be done finally. Thank you.
Senator Ward Engelking votes aye.
There is also a paired vote. Senator Robbie votes aye. Senator Zeiderveld votes nay.
Mr. President, how did I vote?
Senator Grow, you are recorded as voting aye.
May I change that to a nay, please?
Senator Grove changes his vote to nay. Roll call shows 21 aye, 14 nay, 0 absent and excused, a majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill 483 has passed the Senate. Is there a correction to title? Hearing none, the title is approved, and House Bill 483 will be returned to the House of Representatives.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I move that all rules of the Senate interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 484 be suspended.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that all rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 484 be suspended.
Mr. President.
Senator Harris.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the roll call vote used to suspend the rules for the immediate consideration of House Bill 482 be now used to suspend the rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 484.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Roll call shows 34 ayes, 0 nay, 1 absent excused. More than 2/3 having voted the affirmative, all rules interfering with the immediate consideration of House Bill 484 have been suspended. The Senate now has before it for final consideration House Bill number 484. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 484 by Appropriations Committee, an act relating to funding for the Office of Information Technology Services.
Mr. President.
Senator Bierke.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the further reading of House Bill 484 be dispensed with and the journal show it has been read a third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, Senator Bierke, you're recognized to open debate on House Bill 484.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, this is ITS, or OITS, version 2.0. That's kind of a joke there, maybe. House Bill 484 appropriates an additional $10,934,400 to the Office of Information Technology Services for fiscal year 2026 enhancements. This budget was cut by $4.2 million from the governor's budget, and this budget was cut again by $200,000 by JFAC for this version 2.0. And if you recall, that cut has to do with moving that Chinden campus offices and getting ready for the new 80 onboarding Department of Health and Welfare employees. And I started thinking about that, and I don't want to take too much time here, but I remember this game called Telephone. You probably all remember that. You tell a secret to somebody, they tell it to somebody else, and before you know it, the story is nothing like you hear at the first telling of it. Kind of the law of diminishing returns, and something we don't talk about in here, and it causes, I think, some confusion. When you think about an agency, you think about somebody who's been tasked with trying to write up the document that goes to the director of that agency that describes the need for a particular budget item. It could be lengthy. It could be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 pages, and then the director gets it, and he kind of culls it, whittles it down. And before you know it, it gets to DFM, and at some point it gets to the folks at LSO, and they look at that, and they've got to summarize that. And by the time you get it, I can see sometimes how there could be confusion on the floor when we're looking at these items and trying to figure out, what exactly goes into this. And I just wanted to mention that because I think this was one of those ones where, at this point, we've cut $200,000 out of a move that's going to take place to prepare for these employees next year. And we've got, instead of BYOB, it's going to be BYOC, bring your own chair, because that's literally what it's going to be like. But, we are cutting budgets, and I think that's important. Only 40% of the total increase is ongoing of this budget, $4,481,400. Most is one time at $6,452,600. This agency is the central IT management and support agency for most executive branch agency. The agency coordinates statewide IT policies, programs, telecommunications, and cybersecurity under the direction of the Information of Technology Authority Group. Over the last few years, the agency has gone through the Idaho IT Modernization Initiative, which consolidates various agency information technology focused staff into one state agency. We're not there. We got more coming in 2027. And when you're playing that telephone game and you're looking at those documents, you know, the more complicated the agency is and the more complicated it is becoming as IT is, as it consolidates, the more difficulty we have in trying to encapsulate what's important and what to maybe express on the floor here when we're presenting these budgets. If you just take that into account, I think it helps. Looking at the fiscal note, starting from the maintenance provided in Senate Bill 1110, this bill includes 7 enhancements and additional sections of language related to efficiencies reporting. And the 7 enhancements include funding for the new office space on the Chinden campus, including for 80-plus Department of Health and Welfare employees down the road, which we just talked about. The funding for the enterprise security hardware and software, funding for the emergency connectivity network, funding for IT infrastructure, funding for a new ServiceNow project management tool, funding for IT consolidation for Idaho State Police and Department of Juvenile Corrections, and additional IT replacement items. Lastly, this bill includes a one-time supplemental in the current fiscal year to purchase office equipment for the 22 new employees onboarded from the IT consolidation and modernization. Those are the ones that actually get chairs. We do have some additional language in the bill to direct the agency and the Division of Financial Management to compile a report for the legislature that details recommended cost efficiencies and areas to cut the budget now that IT consolidation is almost complete. We're not quite there, but I think the overall efforts of consolidation, if we can obviously keep paying what needs to be paid to make this come to fruition, I think this is going to be a real benefit for the state and for our government. And I ask for your aye vote, and debate is open.
Mr. President.
Debate is open. Senator Groh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the explanation that's been given here. Just to reiterate, this move is the Department of Health and Welfare with about 100 people that will be coming into these facilities, and that's why you see this huge amount of money that's related to that. So we looked at that and said, well, where can we cut this thing? And as we worked with the director, we thought, well, I guess we can cut out some furniture for a couple $100,000 because we still have to move the people, they'll still have to be there, and so they'll be a little bit cramped trying to do their thing as they first arrive, but that was our best thought. Why? Because these folks are responsible for our cybersecurity. It's absolutely crucial that we have the right equipment, we have the up-to-date equipment, so that they can block all of the attacks. It's amazing how many, thousands of attacks come into states and different organizations every day. And these are the folks that are protecting us. And if we have weak links in any of our agencies or departments, that's where they can get in. And so this group is charged to make sure. You've seen their budgets in other departments and agencies, a little bit of IT in every single one. Why? Because we need to make sure that those entities are up to date so that they aren't the weak link and the point of a cyber attack. So we would encourage your support with these folks. Make sure we keep ourselves secure. With that, I encourage your vote. Thank you.
Debate is open. Is there current debate? Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Cook.
Thank you. Senators, we kind of talked about this last time in 1.0 version that we were on. Just again, this is consolidation, so if you look back the last 3 years and even looking forward to next session, you will see FTP going up, you'll see the budget going up, and that is because of consolidation. But the good thing is you should be able to go back and find on the other budgets where the FTP went down. And that will happen when we get to the Department of Health and Welfare as our next one, big one. And that will take probably 80, close to 100 developers. And so you'll see that, again, another spike. But you should see a minus coming out of there. So, again, this is a good budget. We need it. And our director has only been at this 3 years and has been doing an awesome job of keeping things running. So I'd encourage you to give your aye vote on this. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Bierke, you're recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I appreciate the further debate and testimony from senators from 14 and 32. Yes, this is going to be something that's going to be continuing on, and I'll leave it at that. Appreciate your aye vote. Debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 484 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthem.
Aye.
Berndt. Bjerke. Blaylock. Burtonshaw. Carlson. Cook. Den Hartog. Foreman. Galloway. Grow. Guthrie. Harris. Hart. Kaiser. Cole. Lakey. Lenny. Lent. Nichols. Okonowitz. Ricks. Ruckty. Semoroff. Shippey. Taylor. Taves. Van Orden. King. Wintrow. Woodward. Seiderveld. Adams. Carlson. Lakey. Lenny. There is also a paired vote. Senator Robbie votes aye. Senator Zito votes nay.
Roll call shows 24 aye, 11 nay, 0 absent or excused. A majority having voted in the affirmative, House Bill number 484 has passed the Senate. Is there a correction to title? Hearing none, the title is approved, and House Bill number 44 will be returned to the House of Representatives.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate advance to the 15th order of business.
Hearing no objection, the Senate will advance the 15th order of business.
Mr. President, for an announcement.
Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Senators. I don't know how many of you have ever had the opportunity to visit the staff that works for Idaho Public Television that is in charge of running the cameras here and in our committee rooms. But I was thinking about them tonight as we not only are thinking about the staff that's here on the floor with us, but as we near the hour of 9 o'clock, those good folks are down in their room. They have to stay here as long as we stay here. They're the ones that make sure it's our name put up on there. They're turning the cameras when they hear who's talking. So just a shout out to those good folks who work for Idaho Public Television. Certainly unsung heroes. We know they put in long hours just as we do. So if you ever have the chance to go see them, I would encourage you to do that. It's a pretty cool operation.
Further introductions or announcements?
Mr. President.
Senator Guthrie.
For announcement.
You have the floor.
In the category of don't shoot the messenger, Senate State Affairs will meet at 8 o'clock in the morning.
A smattering of applause.
President, for an announcement.
Senator Kaiser.
It is, Senators, it's Senator Lenny's birthday today. Please give him a round of applause.
We wanted to give you sine die, but we couldn't do it. Senator Grow.
Mr. President, I'm
the
sure that JFAC will be happy to know that we will not be meeting at 8 in the morning. And thanks to each of you, that's why we're not having to meet, because we are through with budgets. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate adjourn until the hour of 9:30 a.m. Friday, April 4th, 2024.
Mr. President, I second the motion.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn until the hour of 9:30 a.m. April 4th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. See you tomorrow at 9:30.
Idaho is the dirt under your fingernails after an honest day's work. Idaho is the hug around your neck when your daughter spells her first word. Idaho is the written word of the law, steadfast and impartial, guarding liberty for all. Idaho is the family rifle passed down, a legacy of protection and the right to stand firm. Idaho is the echo of your own voice, unshaken and free, standing tall among the world's silenced. Idaho is the home that's built to weather storms, not empty wallets. Idaho is the quiet trust between a patient and healer, unbroken and sacred. Idaho is the hymn carried by the Spirit, gathering neighbors together in faith and purpose. Idaho is the laughter around a campfire, a family's bond growing stronger with every word. Idaho is the pioneer's will, firm and clear. We govern ourselves, free and unbound. Idaho is what America was. Let's keep it that way. Ask your legislator to sign the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge to preserve our shared values. We ride together.
This bill, I think, it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.